Hey devs, you're tuning into the Debug Log number 110. Yes, we are kicking off 2021 in a brand new and exciting way. We are going visual. For the last 4+ years, we've been delivering audio podcasts on Spotify, on all your favorite streaming services, but now we are moving to video. And now you can get us not only on Spotify and Amazon and Apple Podcasts, but also on YouTube and through our website. So it's a brand new time for us. We're excited. Hope you're excited. But in today's episode, we are talking about best practices in remote game development. So that's all things that we've kind of learned over the past year or so about dealing with remote game development. We kind of impart some of the challenges and kind of the learnings that we've had over this past year. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the first video edit of the Debug Log, episode 110. You're listening to the Debug Log, a podcast about game development. My name's Obinna.
My name's Andrew Curry.
And I'm Ryan Kilgore.
And as you can see, this is the first time you're seeing our faces, which is crazy. We're doing
just that title. Don't turn it off.
Don't touch that. It's funny. I'm pretty sure people were like, oh my God. He's black? Yeah. He is black. Oh, this is the first time they're hearing our voices and putting it into a face, which is crazy. But yeah. Nothing else has changed outside of seeing our faces. We're still the same Ryan. We're still the same Andrew. Still the same Obinna. I don't know what screen we're on, but we're still here. And today we're talking about best practices in remote game development. That is, I feel like over the years, or over this past year, we've all become like experts in working from home. So what we're going to do is talk about kind of the challenges and kind of how we've overcome those challenges, or maybe we haven't overcome all of the challenges, but in working remotely. So to kick things off, let's just start. I guess ask both of you guys, what are some like the main common or challenges that you guys experiences over the past year? Because I mean, after hearing your CEO say, "Hey, Andrew, Ryan, for the next," for me it was like the next month we're going to be working, or next 2 months we're going to be working from home, and then we'll get back to the office. But then it turned out to be, hey, the next year you're going to be working from home. So what are some of the challenges you guys have run into?
Well, I guess the first one was just the adjustment. I have more think about when it first happened, right? Like just getting your mentally prepared for like, yeah, this is a long haul thing. It's not just hey, this week we're going to do something, or, maybe just for a few weeks. It's like, no, this could go on for quite some time. And then just sort of mentally prepping myself for, all right, what's the new cadence for things? Is more just sort of getting over that hump of trying to predict, how's life going to be in the next few months? So I don't know. Dealing with that at first was the most difficult thing for me.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Before this, I was working at home like 1 day a week or 2 days a week already. For me, it wasn't a big deal. But over time, after those initial months happened, that's when you actually started. I think everybody can work on like the project they're working on now. You know what I mean? Like they're like, hey, this is the thing I'm doing. This is cool. And this will be interesting with games too. It's like when you got your work, you're organizing and finishing it. But when you have to coordinate or brainstorm or do other things when you're not together, that can sort of be a challenge. Right. It's like for a while, everybody we were chatting and doing stuff, and we were like, but in our own little cocoon, because you could be, and it's a couple months, and this is great. But then after a while, like you start like June and July and August are just like blurs to me, and now we'll get into tips and how we kind of solve that later. But it was really sort of, because I'm an introvert mostly, but I like charge up. To me, it's been fine. But then having everybody's personality, having everybody realize how much social time you actually still need, even just with your coworkers, or just chatting and talking, not just getting on a meeting to just say, what do you need from me?
Right. I think that's an important distinction, how you're like, when it first started, it's different from, the first couple months versus the last year.
It's like the first couple months.
Right. It's like, oh yeah, this is vacation. This is like, I'm typically, especially like in engineering world, I think there's oftentimes, or in tech world, you're oftentimes you're able to work from home kind of on certain projects for a little bit. So it wasn't like too much of a shakeup, but when it became like a year-long endeavor, you're like, okay, there's things I need to change drastically in order to do this? Because I think when I just personally, when I worked from home previously, I would actually like over dedicate. I'd probably work, 10 or plus hours on a project because it's like, hey, let me just get it done, knock it out while I'm at home. But that sort of methodology or kind of work mentality was not sustainable for a long period of time. So I'm glad that you kind of pointed that out. Like the two different sides of it is like there's the 3 or 4 months versus the 12 plus months of working from home.
Yeah, because the first couple months were what everybody always says they want,
right?
Where they're like, oh, but it also was like, again, it was like a snow day. It was like I just need a little time away from it, especially is like when you're programming stuff. It's like I just need away from everybody talking to me for just a few hours to get this done.
Right.
And like you said, that's a good point. It's like, we'll get into some of these tips, but you have to go like, hold on, this is like a marathon. How do I actually, because usually you're totally right. When I'd stay at home, it'd be like, I got to stay at home because nobody can talk to me for 12 hours because I have to finish this thing. But yeah, now it's like, how do you pace yourself? And that's become, I know I'm the only one with a kid, but my daughter, 10-year-old, that's a huge problem with them because kids are not good at home workers at all. That's why they walk in lines. That's why they have a cafeteria foods and they have a very structured thing at school and they just fall apart. And she's a great student, but they all fall apart.
And I've heard that this is a much an aside, but just like how many students have like degraded in performance, I guess, over like working from home or schooling from home because it's not what they're used to. It's not kind of how they operate usually. So, but yeah, you kind of brought up one of the main things, and I kind of want to talk about one of those common problems and kind of challenges that people face while working from home, which is the communication. Like, hey, you said I don't want to talk to you for a couple hours, so I can get work done. But for me, and I'll just speak personally, just communication, how it kind of catapulted into a whole new stratosphere of, how we communicate while working from home. There was just so many more meetings, so many more like syncs, in the beginning, I think, which I think is kind of a good thing because we were like over communicate. It kind of degraded my actual performance or productivity because I was constantly in meetings, constantly, being torn away from my actual, program work that I couldn't get work done. So I don't know, just tell me kind of what your experiences have been with communication.
I'll go. So
yeah, go for it.
Ryan and I are waiting for pauses. Related to that is like, I agree because a lot of times when people were at a workplace and you didn't get back to them in an email or you didn't like Slack them back or whatever, you'd be like, well, I'm busy. I was out the door. We were talking in a meeting. Now there's like, I know where you are. You're sitting at your house in front of your desk. Like, Slack me back. And it might work for other people, but programmers, it's like when somebody just asks a request for you or tries to like message you or they'll text you, I was like, you know how it is. You lose 10 minutes and you lost 2 hours. Like sometimes it's like, oh my God, I can't. That's been a big kind of challenge, is trying to like corral people. I had to do that with some people. I was like, we're only doing meetings on Mondays and like certain days because like I need a certain days like try to be meeting free. So at least have one day where I can go through stuff,
Right.
Well, I think you hit on something there too about also kind of changing expectations because, like you said, the other person's sitting there at home and like, oh, you're just at home in front of your computer. Why aren't you answering me? Or like, or should I answer this person immediately because I am at home? It's like, well, at first, again, early on, it was probably like, oh, I better do this so they know I'm working or I'm here. Or I've got to respond immediately. But if you do that too much, like you said, Andrew, you kind of start switching contexts and you don't really get anything done because you've got to like unload, reload, deal with this new thing. But again, like you don't have to answer everybody immediately, and you shouldn't expect everyone to answer immediately, even though they are working at home, because it's it's still their personal space, and it's company time. But just because it's an instantaneous mode of communication doesn't mean they should automatically have to jump on it. I don't feel.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like and then you're realizing how everybody works differently. You don't really notice this when you're in the office working together all the time, but like for me, like I'm a really good multitasker in the sense that I could talk to you, and Ryan knows, you guys know this when I play games, I can sit there and have an in-depth conversation and be doing something else if I'm verbally talking. Like I could be going into philosophy and be like playing a game, and like I do better when I'm like actually engaged mentally, and I'm like, but I cannot, and Obinna's good at this skill, I cannot carry on like any kind of chat or like other sort of things and then also be switching back and forth in work. So I start chatting like text wise, I start going, okay, what am I saying? Okay, like it's just like it's a different gear for my brain. I don't mind doing it, but then it becomes like I just did that for 20 minutes. What am I doing? Like, and I can't switch back and forth. I can do that between verbal, but some people can't do verbal. Like I'm going to use Zach. I'm going to pick on Zach, or old guy, because I work with him now. He's, everybody knows who he is. He's somebody that does it verbally. He doesn't, he'll stop talking. He can't talk while he's doing stuff, and he has to stop and all these things, but he'll chat, do stuff. I mean, my point is everybody, the kind of communications kind of has to work with everybody's brain, how everybody processes information. And that's something you didn't really get the separation as much as you did back when we were all there.
Yeah. Do you guys have like a sort of a threshold for styles of communication? Like it's something like just like, hey, I'm just going to do like sort of an IM or Slack for this, but then it kind of gets escalated. Well, maybe I need to jump on a call with this guy to like, okay, now we got to have a meeting. There's different layers of.
That's true.
Yeah, if it needs a little quick answer back, that's easy. Once somebody starts asking me to explain something, it's like, let's just jump on a call real quick because I'd much rather talk to you about this.
Right. The minute
what is this? And like that, their answer's like, what do you mean by this? Like, if you ask me to write more than 2 sentences back to you, I was like, we need to. If it's like the person you're working with directly, not like some formal, interchange.
Yeah. If it hits a paragraph, let's make it a call. And if we need to. And this may be something else we get into later, but if we need to start talking about maybe at least for me, it's like I had a call Friday. I'd start talking about architecture. It's like we need some sort of tool to like draw some pictures at this point because that's an even another level. It's like I got to bring a tool into this because I can say this all day long, but conceptually it's just bobbling around in our heads, and we need to like solidify it on a screen.
So this is really good, and I think this is the kind of how we want the conversation to flow. But I kind of want to pause real quick and kind of go back to some of the challenges. Because we were focused there on communication, I think that's a good conversation to have about some of the tools that we're using, i.e. our best practices and tackling communication while remote. But I just want to talk about some of the other challenges that people, the more common challenges people are experiencing while working from home. And that is, one being communication for sure is like the number one challenge. 2 is the social interaction or social activities or lack thereof. There's loneliness and isolation is kind of like the number 3. Common problem. And I'm looking to the left because I have my notes there. So we also have our setting boundaries, which you kind of spoke to, Andrew and Ryan. Organic interaction, visibility, or appearing visible while remote. Time zone differences is like coming in at 8. And then finally is just meetings or, the amount of meetings or lack of meetings is a remote problem. So again, just to go back and kind of frame that as some of the big issues that we're seeing in remote work, and starting with communication as our first kind of how do we best tackle communication issues. And I think, Ryan, you were just speaking to some ways that you're kind of addressing communication as it relates to technical issues that you might have. And I don't know if you want to keep going on that. I didn't want to interrupt, but just talking about some of the solutions on that.
Yeah, so that does get kind of interesting because, obviously being back in an office with people, like I still miss a whiteboard at this point. Those are, you really see how valuable that just simple piece of technology is, or just a simple tool to do things and just say, all right, let's just go talk about this real fast. Wham, and sketch out some stuff, go through some ideas. But yeah, when you're getting on a call, even a video call, and just talking to people, that you can't do that. Or you could maybe have one in the background, but that's just not going to work great, So we've had to at my job, we've had to find tools, and people pass these around on Slack and kind of, some common things they found, I think they're like Excalidraw, and I forget, it's not SketchUp. I forget the name of another one, but basically these, shared sessions of just basically sketching and brainstorming software. So you can, they got predefined tools for making boxes and arrows and all that good stuff. But I mean, I've found that's come in very handy just again for trying to communicate ideas with somebody and allowing them to draw on the screen too. So, because that's another thing is you can share a screen, and that's a great one-way method of doing things, and a lot of times that'll get it done, but sometimes you need to allow the other person to start marking it up, like, oh, I thought it looked like this, like, oh, I see where that gap is now. You're imagining it to look like a circle, I'm imagining it to look like a cylinder or whatever, and you can kind of get that done. And it definitely helps in interviews too, because before we figured out some of those tools, how are you going to ask somebody some of these coding questions until you have maybe a a small test bed to run code, or again, even just something to draw simple shapes. So you can say, describe the architecture of this thing you worked on before, or whatever. But yeah, I think those tools to sort of lubricate that communication are very helpful and necessary now. And I'm glad to see they're getting better. So some of the first ones I used were kind of like, ugh, but we found some better ones out there.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. And you kind of were talking to interviewing, which I think is a huge kind of conversation to have about, this world of interviewing remotely. We'll get to that in a bit. What about you, Andrew? What other tools or kind of best practices you've kind of found helping you guys out in communication at VBI?
Well, the one thing they mentioned, because we're like a small team. I mean, it's like 4 or 5 people, they're at different times, but what I found at the beginning, what we were doing is just chatting. And then the problem was, like, we'd have a meeting. We'd always have we'd have like a Monday meeting where most everybody on staff, so I'm in meetings all day, but the rest of the team, like developers and artists and stuff, they're not in those meetings. But back then I used to like I'd be in like 3 or 4 meetings a day, go back to the conference room, walk back to my desk, chat with them. I'd kind of give them a skinny of what's going on, or like, yeah, that was about so-and-so. It's just casual. It's not direct. Like, they need to know it, but it's like part of helps everybody's kind of general awareness of what's going on.
Right.
Because there we have like different projects coming up, or we're looking at something, or there's ideas. But what I found is if we had that meeting, and then if there's no really direct reason to get on, what would happen, it would just go, and it'd be Monday, and then be like, oh crap, it's Friday, and I haven't talked to Zach or somebody the whole week. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't need to, but it's also, that's very isolating. For him, I'm fine, because I'm like one of those people, I'll just talk to him and I'm fine. But he is like, he's a little more, he gets a lot of juice out of the social part of being there, talking and like, but everybody does. I mean, that's the thing. After a while, everybody can only do it so long that as it feeds into the culture of just being able to communicate or just get on. There's something about water cooler chat, just getting on and talking about nothing for 10 minutes. And when back at VBI, we had an open desk thing, so everybody's doing that anyway. Like, oh, did you see that thing? And we're all still working, but we're just chatting. Right. So what we started doing, long story short, is we had to start doing it for a certain project, but we still do it now. Where in general, we just use the Discord room chat, and we just get on. Like, I made a Discord channel for us, just so there wasn't a direct transactional thing. He's like, just get in there. And Zach will be in there if he wants to talk, and then we'll just jump in if you're available. And like me and Zach and Jan, people, and we'll just be in there, especially during all the elections that we're in there ranting stuff all day, like all these things. But all the time, sometimes we're just silent, but we're just in there working. Right. You know what I mean? And every now and then it's like somebody brings up something, and it's fine. That's like, we kind of found that you have to kind of simulate, I don't know what it is, like non-intentional conversations,
casual conversation. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. I really like that idea, and I think that's something that we should recommend to some of the listeners, especially for people with smaller teams, just hopping in Discord chats, because I know at a larger team that might not scale. But, for
Discord's the key, though. Right.
Say again?
Well, I was going to start. We're like all late. Discord is the key because it's not like you don't have to specifically call somebody and the answer is just like, hey, jump in that room if you guys are ready, or if anybody wants to talk. I can see. I'll see that when Ryan and Zach are in there playing their game. Like, hey guys, what are you doing? Like, it's just like a hangout. So it's like, it's the same way you see somebody in the water cooler room. It kind of works that way. Right. Actually, it's pretty good tip.
That's true. I agree. I guess for us, I think the biggest kind of push, we were always using Google Docs, but I think with remote work, we've just kicked it up to, level 2 billion. And that Google Docs are used for everything, meeting notes. We're just constantly interacting. I think it's a great tool, and it's free, that you could just use and leverage for meeting notes. You could leverage it for, documentation, collaborating on report writing. There's just so many kind of great use cases where you can just get in there and collaborate on a documentation or document for anything. And that's same for like slides or anything like that. So I think our Google use has escalated. Of course, there's Confluence, but I think it's a kind of asynchronous communication in that case. But it's just another form of communication I think we've kind of used as our organization is growing. And I think it's a good use case for, large organizations. I think to speak to, I guess, game night, and well, that maybe is another one to talk about, which are actually the second one, which is social communication. But go ahead.
Oh, as you said, I just got me thinking. You're talking about going back to the Discord thing. Like, how is Discord for large video streams and groups? Because we also use the technology WebEx, and I'm sure you maybe heard of that, or some of you use it, and that's great just for like we use for big company meetings where it'd be over 100 people, you know. And that is great for that, but one thing it really stinks at is, like you said, starting that thing up takes forever. It's like, all right, I'm going to click on this link, and I'm going to join this room, and I'm going to wait on this thing. And it's like, it's such a hill to climb to get into the communication portion, where Discord's awesome. You know, I use it with you guys. I have a D&D group I play with. It's just like, bam, I'm in. I can stream video. We can share video, and it's so smooth. And so finding those type of things.
We never use Discord for video. Well, we do sometimes, because Zach will be doing something, and he has to show me. He's like, let me show you something. I'm like, okay. It's okay. You have to do those boosts and stuff. We've never done actually that. You can make it way better quality, but I mean, I still think Zoom and like web out, those things are bigger for larger meetings and real meetings. Discord is just, I mean, it'd be cool if they just had a casual video version of it. I guess you can do video in that.
Yeah, because you can do our D&D group's 5 people all streaming video, and then our DM will share his computer screen to show us maps and stuff. So, so at that scale, maybe for team meetings it would be really good, but big ones, man.
Right, and I kind of think though that the audio is part of like it's not like, hey, I need to get on here and look. It's just like, hey, I'm just turning on the audio and like we're just talking. Half the time it's on my phone. And when Alex was at home, my daughter, and I was like making her a sandwich, and they're talking to me like it's just sort of like an open chat that you can like, hey guys, I gotta go. Like Zach will run away for a couple hours, come back because he's got the baby now. He's taking care of this baby, and he's like, all right, I gotta go take care of him for a little bit. I'll be back. And like, it's just kind of casual, and you don't have to jump on. Nobody's mad if you don't. Like, it's just like, hey, I need to do stuff. I need to get off this right now, you know? So.
Cool. I guess one more thing on communication is, as far as it relates to, you know, inter-team, I think Discord is a great solution. What about like cadence? I think the cadence of communication is another aspect of communication, because you mentioned like you going kind of like a full week without even talking to Zach prior to Discord. Right. What other methods, I guess, Ryan, I think this is to you, just that you've dealt with or kind of are working with to increase maybe not increase, but let me just say like manage the cadence of communication where you're feeling connected with your teammates?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I'm the type of person and that, you know, if I don't have a meeting or some sort of random encounter with people, then I'll just go for days without it. So sometimes I need to, you know, just to refill the social meter, or, you know, the tank. You know, if I get on a call with somebody about maybe just a technical problem or something, I'll try to find just, hey, like, how's it going? Just try to, you know, talk a little about something other than work, sort of like that water cooler chat, just because, I'll let myself go for days. So that's been kind of a challenge for me, is, you know, trying to find a way or a reason to, you know, keep communication with people on my team or just at work in general. Because I mean, I don't get that lonely, but you say I go 3 days and don't talk to anyone and I'm just sitting there doing code or planning. It's like, oh, I what am I doing? Like, why am I living life at this point? I got to talk to somebody. But yeah, that's been tough for me. And I don't know if I have a great answer for that now, except for I try to force myself to it's forced me to become a little more outgoing. I'm not a type A person, but have been trying to do that more now, just so I can kind of get that human connection. Right.
So I guess one of the questions, or why I pose this question, is because I think that communication can really break down, especially when we start talking like for the IC or individual contributor versus like a manager, where, you know, they have direct reports where they need to kind of have more of that communication structure set in place, or even like a PM that, you know, needs to constantly communicate with their team, which I imagine you're doing constantly, Andrew. What ways are you like keeping that kind of cadence? Are there ways you're setting up process to kind of make that work better?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. As you said that, I was thinking that's the sort of communication. Like, okay, so let's go. It's like pre-COVID days, PC. Like when we were all back, it was much easier, especially in an office, if you're like checking in on different teams and talking to people. You just walk up and, hey, what's going on? You guys are doing good? Like, it's much easier just to talk to them casually and go, hey, how's it going? You know, and they can go, yeah, I'm kind of like working at this. Or you can visibly see people, right? Like Zach, they're struggling with things sometimes, and I'm like, hey, what is that? You know, and he's like, you know, he was flipping out, and I was like, okay, hold on, let me look at what you're. But nowadays, you're totally right. When you're, because email, even texting stuff, especially with somebody who you think sort of your authority, right? It's so transactional, and sometimes you don't want to do it unless you really need to do it. So a lot of those problems can easily fall under the crack where it's like, well, I didn't know. I thought I had to do that, but I didn't want to bother you. And it's like it's been like 3 weeks. What have you been doing? It's like we should have been. I'm not saying Zach this one, but I'm just saying like in general, it's like, hey, little problems can kind of balloon, and whereas before you could casually see stuff, you get because there's no casual like look over the shoulder online. You can't just casually see what people are working on.
You can't hear them cursing in the corner. Like,
that's so essential. I mean, to me, my managerial style is it's very familiar. I try to be like, hey, what's that? Oh, well, I guess that looks good, but we're trying, I mean, it's not a very, I like, people being comfortable with what we're doing and everybody kind of get into it. Right. So it's not like a formal review process of all these things. So it's very hard to just tap somebody on the shoulders like, that's kind of cool, but so yeah, I mean, what we've tried to start doing, it has been a problem because we had issues like really had issues with that. So, I mean, in general, those little talks have helped because the more we're just all on with each other, people will mention something and go, it's just less, that's been a big thing. And then also we just make sure to check in, like we've had to just do actual meetings that are weekly, a couple on projects. What I've done is actually include more of them on meetings they wouldn't normally be on, like project sort of meetings, and pull them in so they can get part of it. So that's like, you have to get more formal with some of that stuff. And also you have to go both ways, like a double edge.
Right. Actually, I agree.
Andrew, do you guys do any sort of like, I just remember this for some of our cadence at work, just because it's my manager doing it, not sort of me, but we have sort of the beginning and end of the week, I guess, beginning of the week, sort of a stand up, just sort of like on a Tuesday catch up and be like, hey, what's going on with everyone? Where are you? How are things going? Maybe look through some tickets. Maybe it's just a quick call to, everybody to check in. And at the end of the week, we do planning for the next week. So Friday. So we kind of have that book into the week so we can like synchronize and just make sure some of that stuff you're not, you're not maybe catching sometimes can maybe get caught when, you're actually going through the tickets and Jira and be like, oh, you're still working on X. So that's been like 4 days now. I thought that maybe that was a 2-day thing. Do you need some help, or what's the hang up? Is there a blocker? So that type of stuff can definitely be, that sort of cadence can be very helpful.
Yeah, we've done that with our we have a Monday. We don't do it on Friday. By Friday, 3:00, I'm done. It's like I'm Friday. But like, well, I mean, everybody sort of kind of scatters. It like, it's very hard to, and ours is different. We don't have the intense of a team probably as you do, but like but on our Monday meetings, we had to really look at like what hours have we been spending? What are we doing? What did they do last week? It's made us get more meticulous because you can't really over the shoulder manage that anymore.
I think that's kind of what I want to point out as well, is you use the word meticulous. And I think kind of adding process to remote work is kind of crucial as far as, I mean, it does add more structure especially for ICs who really just want to stay in their room and just code or do whatever or do work on their work. Process is kind of what really keeps efficiency going, I think, especially in these projects and bigger companies, even smaller companies, is adding in process and like those bookended, stand-ups. For us, we do stand-ups. Well, it's optional stand-ups every single day. So if you want, it's almost like the Discord thing. It's like an open room. If you go in at 10 a.m., someone will be there. And then there's also the process of just, manager to IC is like, hey, or direct report is like, I'm going to check in with you every 2 weeks. We're actually have a recurring meeting on Google Calendar. It's no surprise. So it takes away that transactional kind of feel because, either way, it's either going to be a casual conversation with some mix in of like what's going on in work. And what's happening, what's going to come. So I think that also makes it feel a little less like just a meeting for meeting's sake.
Right.
So I think, adding in these processes, I think is really helpful in kind of structuring your homework, I guess, or work from home. But yeah, I think that's some things that we do is just adding in, recurring meetings. We do stand-ups like Brian mentioned. And I think those are really helpful in kind of, another thing I kind of want to point out is just, we mentioned just interviewing and kind of that process. And I think it's important to have those processes in place, especially when, you're in onboarding new people to your team, because if you don't have those meetings, then they are entering, a void of like, I don't know what to do, who to talk to. So those are really crucial. And one thing we've done.
I want to say in general too, like there's always, I always resent it because I think meetings, I don't know. Again, they're not all created equal. And before this, people like, there's always this culture of like meetings. We just have too many meetings. Even that Jason Fry, who I like, that Basecamp guy, they're like, shouldn't have as many meetings. Like, that's sort of true, like in the corporate sense. That corporate, when you get really corporate, I do a lot of meetings, and most of them are pretty essential because it's like, let's get down to the bottom and do this. And what I like about this, it's what it's caused is that most meetings, it's sort of helped meetings become more meaningful because it actually, you're in so many that people don't want to do the distracting ones anymore because they're like, I'm tired of Zoom. I don't want to do this. And then when you do have them, they're like, let's get to the point. Let's do this. Let's get, it seems like it's kind of trained us to have more efficient meetings.
Right. And I like that you brought up meetings. We could just segue right into that. It's kind of best practices around meetings. And you want to talk about some of the ones that you kind of just touched on a few, but what specifically you guys are doing to kind of optimize on meeting time?
Usually, I mean, our PIs, our clinicians we work with, and people who work in these grants or partners, she does she'll put together an agenda usually and go over that with them because that group is like an academic group and they do really well with they need to stay on track because they'll go off for hours if they start talking about stuff. And I say, and it's really just kind of compiling this. It's what it really, you can boil most of it down to is being prepared more than before, because I remember I worked in a lot of corporate environments and we would have meetings to remember what the last meeting was about. You know what I mean? Like, let's meet about that and we'll talk about it again to meet about it then. You're like, what was this last meeting about? And I'll spend 40 minutes remembering what we talked about. It's all right, let's set up another meeting for 2 weeks. I was like, what are we doing? Now we have to go I have these questions. I have these things I need to get answered. We meet about that. That's what we do in our prep meeting. We prep for those meetings going, what do we need to find out in that meeting? So we go in loaded to, because if you don't, I know it's like this before, but if you don't, people are even busier now. So in the past, when it was, I know we still did those remotely in the past, but that person you're trying to get, if we miss something, getting back in touch with them is harder because their schedule is more full now. So you just have to be more prepared and make sure you get all your, usually from our side, questions and, clarifications lined up.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I think that's the biggest one. I think, agenda is the key there, is just having a solid agenda. Another one that I think is really important is, so it's actually productive. I think we've had, in the beginning, we did have a lot of meetings. And I think the core content was distilled properly, but we still left the meeting with what did we just do? And I think the thing that remedied that was actually leaving with and writing down action items hey, before the meeting ends, what were our actions for this? A, B, and C. And then cool. And then we can go and work from that. And without having action items, I think it's easy to be like, okay, I feel like we had a great productive conversation, but I'm not sure what we're supposed to do next after this. So I think action items are the big one.
Yeah, real quick, Ryan, before you go, I was going to mention, that's another one thing real quick, is that action items are another thing. I don't know, just in culture, I just hear Fight Club every time I hear action items. Ryan, what I'm talking about? It becomes so made fun of. That's your action. That's going to be your number one agenda. You can do all these keywords, but the problem is those keywords are keywords for a reason. They're funny to make fun of because people do use them as buzzwords. And action items is always one that made me laugh. Right. Before I've said in hundreds of meetings, go nowhere, and they get out of it, and they're like, I don't know, what do you want me to? It's we already. Because people just, again, it goes through that process. They don't get it. It's you got to give them what they're supposed to do out of it.
Right.
So I just think of Fight Club every time I hear.
Start a blue ribbon task force for that. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you guys on the agendas and planning, and something we actually started doing for this release cycle at my office was we'll get sort of our goals from the higher ups, like what's the big vision, what we want in this next product release. So that'll drive what the product team's going to actually produce. So we'll kind of have those broad strokes, and we'll put those down in Confluence. Say here's kind of what we're targeting right now. It's okay, cool, and then the PM with the engineers assigned to that will say, all right, we'll start thinking about this, look at it, write down some notes in Confluence, the questions you're going to have. Basically, like some of you said, we're creating an agenda or planning this out for how we're going to attack it. So, within our team, we get our game plan together, say, all right, here's our attack plan. Now, where do we need to maybe get sign off or advice or whatever? Who do we need to communicate about this attack plan with this peripheral to our team, perchance? Because, like you guys said, there's always those people in the company, they're busier now and they're jumping on and off all these calls. And we're only going to have them for these 30 minutes. So we can't screw about and just be like, hey, how's it going, Bob? And what about this? What about that? It's like, no, I already looked at this. And here are like my top 3 concerns. And based on that, what advice can you give us? What feedback can you give us? Do you think this is the way we should attack this as the next action item, like you said? And we'll sort of and having that plan and going into that and getting those people's input, we'll then update our Confluence page with the answer to those questions and sort of the next steps. And then then leaving that meeting, we'll have this nice plan. Okay, cool. We have a much clearer idea of where we're going to go with this. And because like you said, if we don't do that, then those people hop off the call. And now the way we do things, we're very regimented about like, okay, this is a 30-minute call. I got to go. And I think people are easier. They can just get up and leave a call easy. Like in a meeting before, you could maybe hold on to them for another 10 or 15 minutes. Now it's like, now they're just like, nope, got to be somewhere else. Boop, It's like, all right, well, that's all the boss time we got. So we're just going to have to guess at this or wait the next 2 days to get feedback on that. And hopefully I've got enough to start. But yeah, definitely having, I think it's made us a little more, I'm going to use the word regimented again, but we've got a little more paperwork to things now, but it's also helping us keep track of things.
Yeah, and action items with deadlines too is another important thing too, because everybody's got to recognize that. And even though I'm trying to get something organized or something figured out, I still have this tendency to go. It gets towards that end of that meeting's like, all right, yeah, sure, yeah, let's go. All right, sounds good, awesome, sounds good. All right, we'll see you later. Figure it out. A bad manager is the one that we've had all these in the past before, where it goes, all right, we'll figure that out later. I mean, there's a difference between saying segmenting and pushing something and really figuring it out later, and just going. The path of least resistance always like, all right, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll look into that. Yeah, sure. So you're going to look into that? Sure. It's not going. If you need, like, from our case, we need stuff like content from these people. Like, we basically work with almost like people that don't know what they want over a year. So we need them to go, we need your content for that video, what you want the script to do, what you want these things to say. And like our people and our organizers have been really good about going to Andrew, when do you need that from them? Give them a deadline. Like giving people deadlines that you need stuff from them. That feels weird at first, and it feels like, just they're working on it. Though, especially in this time, that stuff will slide for months. You need to tell them when you need it, and so everybody can be accountable. Just because you'll never get it. I mean, it's not about being, getting deadlines aren't about people getting in trouble. It's all about us like segmenting our work and like actually focusing. It's not about,
I got to follow up on that one. So that one is in relation to your PIs or people that you're working with externally. How are you dealing with deadlines? Same with you, Ryan, too. Like when you do the sprint planning, how are you guys dealing with internal deadlines and kind of holding people accountable on that?
I just yell and scream.
I'm held accountable. I don't hold too many others accountable really right now. But how we do that is, I mean, we've got right now just like a deadline. It's like, hey, release is going to be out in like say 7 weeks from now. It's like, you need you to story point and work out what work you think you can get done within that. So we don't have like a strict deadline. Well, we've got an overall like end goal, like it's got to be out by like, April or whatever. But, I guess to break it down more, we actually story point things and see like, hey, can we meet that April date? And if not, what can we maybe pare down to hit that date if we really got to have it out by then, So, and again, that just goes back to the planning and the, structuring, trying to plan things out, break them down and chop them up into enough granularity or understanding to where you can say, all right, yes, we can get to that deadline. And here's what getting there looks like. It's like you'll have 4 out of 5 features. If you want to stretch it or push the deadline a little, then we can have the 5th. But yeah,
I guess my more global question. Sorry, my more global question is kind of like, has your planning for deadlines or working with deadlines in a remote sense changed at all from how it used to work previously?
I don't feel like it's changed a whole heck of a lot. Right. We're still on our same cadence. It's just like how we may deal with that. The structure to deal with it and get to it may have changed somewhat, like we've been talking about. But I don't know. We still, our deadlines really haven't changed. I mean, we went from like 3 releases a year to 2, but that was just more of the scope of the features we were trying to get out and saying like, 3 was too many release cycles, and let's just pare it down to 2. I don't know that it really had so much to do with. I mean, maybe some of it did, but we're pretty similar. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. Cool. That makes sense. Sweet. Anything from you, Andrew, as far as like, did your process change at all remotely as far as like?
No, I mean, like, again, I think I mean, VBI is such a much more casual place for that kind of stuff. But so really, once you establish that casual line of connection again, it was really important. I mean, we do have deadlines, we have stuff going on, but making people feel comfortable. The big thing about, and I mentioned this earlier, but it's related to deadlines, which is, but it helps with deadlines, is making people feel comfortable about coming to you if something's going wrong, and having avenues for the people to like to communicate with you if things are going wrong, or they don't agree with something, or something's a problem. That's the biggest thing, because people don't. It's a lot of there's a lot of resistance to write that email or write that thing, complain about, you know what I mean? Whereas you get a thing and chat with them, like, how's it going? And they're like, I just don't feel. People can just say okay. I was like, that doesn't sound like a good okay. What do you mean? It's like they're not going to write that in an email. So that has been essential about this, because that helps. For me, our deadlines are tracking it. You know, I mean that, and we have stuff, and we have deadlines. We have deadlines in budgeting. That stuff has never changed because we have timelines that are pretty strict as far as grant timelines. But it's more about trying to see those problems or deadlines earlier on that I just can't see now. What I don't, I'm not over their shoulder.
Gotcha. Cool. I love it. And I think that's kind of a segue to kind of my next question as far as.
What about you, man? Did yours change at all, really? Or?
No, it didn't. And I think that's kind of one of the points I wanted to make. I feel like that part of scheduling hasn't changed. I think planning is still planning for the most part. And that hasn't affected. I think the one thing that does affect, though, is when people on your team are influenced by the current situation. Like, maybe their kids are, they are require more attention, and they can't devote, an 8-hour day, or they can't even devote a full 4-hour day. Maybe it's like a 2-hour day because their kid is going through something and they have to work with them for something. Or there's so many things that have gone, I think, in different households that prevent people from even working for a day or multiple days. So I think, or even they might even get COVID and they might be out for X amount of days.
Yeah, that happened to us too. We had a coworker got COVID.
Right. So and I'm just like, I think that's the biggest kind of shakeup to a lot of companies and deadlines and planning, and how you plan around that or plan for that. And what do you do in those situations? But I think not a better conversation, but a different conversation that I kind of want to have is that comfort level that you kind of try to instill in your team, and basically the social isolation interaction kind of piece that we want to talk to is, what are you guys doing to kind of promote social interaction, make people feel comfortable? We've had a really big conversation within our team multiple times, and they've all come up organically, which I want to talk to next. But the first one is kind of like, how do we kind of build social, comfort level within your team?
I think the stuff that doing, like I said, the casual conversations, but doing things that people just don't, I mean, they value it now, they understand it, but really unintentional conversations, just stuff that doesn't seem like it really matters when you're just talking to people. So we did that, not with work, but even with other projects I've worked on. I was working on a project with one of our friends, and like we had these other 2 or 3 people come on board. This is like a freelance thing that we never even met. Mm-hmm. And we get on, like, have multiple weekly meetings about like deadlines. We're all using, some GenZ-ers, everything going. And we start. I'm not doing that project for a different reason, but we had to start going, you know what? We need to have like these little happy hour things where we just get on for a couple hours on a Friday night. And we did that. And it's like you're talking about inane stuff. We're talking about WandaVision. We're talking about Mandalorian. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But just doing that lets everybody. Like, that's why people go to lunch. Coworkers go to lunch together. They have it's just that stuff is essential, because sometimes your coworkers aren't your best friends, but they're like, it's essential to have that bond a little bit more than, you know what I mean? Like that casual, even just familiar kind of bond. It's like, it makes it essential. And so you have to force that. You have to make them do that or do activities like that, I think.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, man, that's something I miss. Like, our office did that for a little while. It's like with the happy hours, but I don't know if it's because we've also grown quite a lot over the past year. So how you would do a happy hour with like 150 plus people, I don't know how you do that anymore. But it's like break it down to maybe at the team level or something. And maybe that's something I'll bring up, because that sounds kind of nice, because we don't do a lot of it. The one thing we do though is we have like Slack channels for certain interests, and I think that helps out some, where it's like, oh, we've got a games chat and an exercise chat and a music, so that way, like you said, it kind of promotes some of these water cooler type of things where all of a sudden somebody's dropping in, oh, boom, look, the Star Wars license is up now. People other than EA can start making these games, and all of a sudden everybody's, oh, I love Knights of the Old Republic, and so you kind of just have this nice little aside sometimes where you get to kind of bond with people. Like you said, maybe people I haven't met because they came in during COVID and have never seen anyone face to face in the company, but at least now can connect the name with an interest. And like if when we do get out of this, if I see him at the next company meetup, I'll be like, oh, hey, Justin, what's up, man? Yeah, have you been playing that game? And we already have some common ground to start on. So
right. Awesome. Yeah, I like both of those, and I think we do it at Unity as well. But one thing I did want to talk to was, dang it, I just forgot, it just slipped my mind. But Andrew was what did you talk about, Andrew? You were talking about happy hour,
forcing casual conversations and.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Specifically as it relates to working on new projects, I think in our kind of situation, we are constantly dealing with brand new sets of people almost at every different project. We're working with like the AI team, we're working with the asset bundle team or something. We're working with new teams and new people. So one thing that we started doing, or thing I started doing, is before our project even kicks out and we start assigning JIRA tickets, is we do a kind of just a casual meet and greet and just talk, whether it's for 30 minutes or for an hour or 15 minutes or 5 minutes, just talking with the other people on your team that you're going to be working with, just to get to know them. I think it's a good way to like break the ice and not, hey, how's work going on like implementing X, Y, or Z? That's not your first conversation with them. It's more like, hey, where are you from? What games do you like? What games have you worked on, et cetera, et cetera. So I think kind of establishing just a core level of like, hey, this is just casual conversation. Get to know me. I get to know you is a good way to set the project off on the right foot, I guess. Because work talk is definitely going to come. So I think it's good to kind of set some time for that.
See somebody as a person and not just a resource.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and related to that, though, like also realize, too, that not just in the kickoff meetings, if you're going to have to be brainstorming, if it's not like just a meeting where, hey, this is what we do, like these are the product, these are the things we're hitting about. But if it's actually, what are we doing? Like you're making a game with a team, right? Let's just say that. That's sort of what we do with it's like different partners. They don't know what they want. So you have to sort of brainstorm. But for that, you need to actually brainstorming is not supposed to be efficient. Efficiency and brainstorming are different ends of the scale. It's supposed to be, it's not like you schedule that for 30 minutes and you go, all right, we just banged out. Because that gets people in there to just start writing down ideas and start, this is what we're doing. So what are we doing? And I was like, no, that's not what we're trying to do here. We just need to actually sit here and all talk about this. So to me, like brainstorming should almost be like 4 times what you think. Like, because you need to kind of force that actual like kind of connection with people and talking about ideas and stuff. That has been a challenge, but you have to make sure you have to make sure that time is it's scheduled somehow, because a lot of times in the past you meet about it, then you guys are walking back to your desk talking about it, then you go to lunch, you kind of chat about it, like it's an ongoing thing. You don't have that anymore. You have to make sure there's like actual carved out space for that, because it's not every meeting is created the same or supposed to be efficient.
Yeah. And then I just to be clear about it, mine was like not even brainstorming. It's just like, I just want to make clear. And what was the other thing? I think Ryan was talking about just, I don't remember. Well, anyway, we can move
channels
on.
of communication, common interest. And
I guess one thing I did want to say, sorry, did you want to go?
I was just going to say that when people do some of those like activity things, some of that stuff, they like actually also make sure you just have time where you're doing nothing. Just have a happy hour, because a lot of the time it's like people having a real party and then you want to go and they want to play 800 board games. Like, let's just talk. Let's just kind of just chill. It's like, because if it's all coordinated, then what are we doing?
Right. It's another meeting.
Just real guys. Let's do that.
Cool. And one thing I wanted to highlight, especially with just making people feel uncomfortable. I remember Ryan was talking about just talking with someone in a similar games channel or, Star Wars channel. But before that, before you even like meet them in the channel, one thing that we've done is like after someone is like enters the company, is we schedule a one-on-one with them, with different people on the team. I think there's opposite sides of this. One side is like they have a lot of meetings now. The other side is like they get to meet some people on the team, which I think is also good, because outside of that, you're kind of walking into this void. And I think that's part of this question that I wanted to ask is like, because culture has changed. Like your company culture or team culture, unfortunately, did change when you moved to remote work. It's not the same. Like you said, you can't have those water cooler conversations. So how are you like maintaining a good company culture or team culture in this remote way? And I think for us, it's one of the ways is keeping those one-on-ones happening and having those conversations outside of work, not about anything related to work, and making that a process.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty important. And I sometimes wonder, like how good are some companies doing that? And I'm hoping our company's doing that fairly well. But is when people are brought on during the pandemic, that becomes super important. And so they're not just, like you said, sitting around in a void and just getting these little pings from people here and there, just sort of asking for work or questions. And you're like, oh, what's going on here? So, how you do that effectively, I'm not sure, but I'm hoping our company does well. That are just people are doing well with that in general. Because I can imagine starting at a new place during a pandemic, and like you say, having to integrate into a culture with this sort of like almost like looking through a straw sometimes. Like, oh, I can kind of see stuff here and there, but I don't have the big picture yet. So
right. Yeah, I appreciate that you're wearing our Debug Log shirt. By the way, I just noticed. Sorry, what were you saying, Andrew?
I was gonna say that, like, I think
we're visual now, man. Come on.
I have a sticker. Oh my god, what were we talking about?
I don't know. I just derailed us.
Yeah, you just derailed me.
We're talking about starting a job maybe during COVID.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I was gonna say. That's got to be the craziest thing because one, there's so much. I mean, I don't have any personal experience. I just want to talk about this for a second. It's like unlimited possibilities, right? Like you could be. I mean, it depends on how a company's handling that. But you could be here and apply for a job. It's in Seattle, and just like, well, we're not going to be in the office for the next year, so it doesn't matter. You can still be in Atlanta. I don't mean, and maybe from now on, right? Maybe that's just how we have our teams from now on. It doesn't matter. So the possibilities of building a team now are really kind of cool, especially for your game or like people out there looking for work. If you guys are indie game people, listen to this and want to do stuff with collaborators. But God, that's got to be hard coming onto a team like. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, that's what we did at VBI. You take somebody out the first day for lunch. All that stuff. I mean, again, we're going to keep harping on this. It's like going to lunch matters with your team. So doing that kind of stuff. Because you can feel it when you used to, but even the old days when you were like busy for a while, and you didn't get to do that or socialize for a while. Like Obinna and I would do that we'd have to we just go there and talk to the artist for a little bit. You know what I mean? You kind of feel that. I feel like I'm disconnecting from everybody because I've been busy. It wasn't like you're doing something wrong, but it's like if you don't have that kind of connection. So that's crazy to me how you make it. I don't know how and the possibilities are endless, but now I don't know how you kind of assimilate into a culture because
Right. So I've heard it so often that like new people come on and when we're doing these one-on-one conversations and then it's like a month or two in and then I check back in with them. They're like, it's funny. It's crazy that I've never even seen the office. I'm like, wow, I live in the office. It's crazy that you've never even seen it or know where it is in the city, which is kind of crazy. Okay, so we're almost at time, but I kind of want to have one more conversation, and this is kind of a big conversation that's kind of circulated within my team for a couple of times, for a while now, and that is the question of. I feel like we're kind of getting away from the agenda, but anyway, how you quantify and kind of qualify value as individual contributor to your, whether it's a customer or to the company or to your team, because I feel like in remote work, it's oftentimes, I think it might be easier when you have a task and you have a deadline and then you can kind of meet those tasks easily. But when there's kind of more open-ended questions for you to ask, maybe it's a brainstorming session or like figuring out, I guess for us, it could be like optimizing a game or something like that, where it's kind of a harder target to kind of pinpoint, and it's not like a task-based thing. It can be, but anyway, my point is like how you kind of qualify and quantify value that you're bringing to a team, because I feel like it's easy for people to see your value when there's visibility around you. When they see you working in Visual Studio, you creating a model.
You're saying how do you show that to your
team or to your manager? Because basically you don't have someone over your shoulder like anymore to see that you're working, essentially.
That's true.
And like even like small issues, like say Ryan, you run into a bug like a threading bug, and it takes you a week to figure it out, or maybe you can't figure it out because you need, and there might be some.
Never happens. Always.
It never happens, of course. But I'm saying there's an issue where it takes a long time to get to your task, actually. And people don't see that you're running into issues with threading, or that your editors keeps crashing, or you're running out of space on your hard drive, and something, it takes so long to import a project or something like that. And that time has to be accounted for. And it's hard to account for when you don't, when you're not around. So I'm wondering how you kind of are kind of wrestling with that and showing that you're bringing value, or, you're still working hard, essentially.
Yeah, that is a little tough because, I mean, like you said, if you want to quantify something, you've got systems like Jira and ticketing to where if you want to like really put raw numbers on it, it's like, I got X amount of story points done in this week, or I got the X features done, and, here I can kind of, give you that. And even like what we do sometimes is have maybe an occasional showcase for a new feature. If it's in a presentable state, maybe not quite fully baked, but you could maybe have a company or a team meeting, say, hey, this is what this is going to kind of look like. Feedback, hey, isn't this cool? What do you think? Type of thing. So that very much puts you in front of people and kind of shows that. But it does kind of get a little harder when, like you're saying, these sort of more day-to-day or things go a little askew from the norm, where actually in the past week, I was having this issue where it's like I was trying to debug something. I kind of knew maybe what was going on or how to recreate it, but it was in containers, like in Kubernetes containers or whatever, instead of just on like the raw metal of my machine. And so that was sort of my fight for a couple of days, is like, I'm trying to learn this new Kubernetes way of doing things versus just the old way I was doing it. And it's great because I'm learning and I've got all this knowledge now sinking into my head to now use this new technology and then transfer that knowledge if somebody else runs into it. But that's harder to, that's harder to quantify because that wasn't in the ticket. The ticket was just, hey, alarms are set off if disk space runs out and then the message bus fails, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, okay, well, I can deal with that. But then the amount of work and effort and learning that went into that is much harder to pin down. And, and that's, I think, something that just, again, keeping up these lines of communication really becomes important. Like I'll reach out to the guy who maybe implemented our Kubernetes, solution, and he'll show me kind of how it works, and then maybe I'll get on a call with him and my PM and say, hey, we're trying to work this out, here's what it looks like here's what it looks like there. And that's very much tougher because all of a sudden you see something that says like, oh, well, wouldn't that have just taken you 2-3 days and now it's at a week and a half? It's like, yeah, but I had to fight all this other stuff too. And if you don't believe me, talk to this guy. I'll tell you how crazy it is. So that's definitely tougher when they can't just see you there, or like, you're not checking in.
And I think that's a good point at the very end where you're like, don't believe me, check on this guy. And I think there are cases when that you can't do that. You can't point to somewhere and say, hey, check with this person. And you kind of mentioned, Zach, earlier, like there was a week that you hadn't talked to him. You're like, oh, what you been working on? And it's like, if we can't say, ask, X, Y, or Z person, then, how do we hold him accountable, or how can he kind of defend his work ethic?
Well, how can you make better too? I mean, if somebody's struggling through things and you don't know what they're doing, that's the one place you're supposed to make them, help them,
Right.
It's like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You should have done this. And they're like, oh, cool. Or it's actually or like you're saying, Ryan, it's an actual issue. Because part of me, the first part of me also says to people listening to this as programmers, it's like, give up the idea of getting any credit for those battles you fight. There's so many wars, like the effort of mental strain. It's the hours, though. Time is what only people pay attention to. So you have to let go of that sometimes, because it's like, it could have been an hour, but I was in there in the trenches shooting. Like, it's like I'm fried because I had to go through this whole thing, and they're like, oh, you fixed that? I'm like, nobody cares.
Yeah. Does it work? Yes.
I was like, one, come to peace with that in your heart. But two, what you said is totally right, Ryan. It's like, you have to just be transparent and try to get them to talk about it as much, because part of that is talking about it, but also don't talk about it. Here's a pro tip, and I've told this to Zach, and I'm telling you, this is a really good tip for people that are junior programming stuff. Make sure you're transparent about your problems with people, even your superiors or people that are senior to you. Don't phrase it like you're complaining about it. Don't phrase it like it's phrase it like, I'm working on it and I'm figuring out, I'm going to get it. I'm telling you this as a thing because people tend to, this is like a millennial issue where like people tend to do like, but I had this issue and now it's your issue because I just threw it onto you. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. I do think it's a generational thing. And when you do that so many times to a senior person, they get So like it becomes, and now in these times more than ever, people don't want you to throw their problems. Like you got to go and figure stuff out. Tell me what's going on. Tell me how you're doing. Like I'm struggling with these battles, but you know what? I'm gonna get it. I feel like I'm gonna get it soon. And if you don't, it's like I couldn't get it. But it's not a complaint. It's like I'm being transparent. I don't know. I really don't know this part. Maybe you can help me.
And that's a two-way street too for like any of the senior people who may have to field those questions, and never feel like we're wasting your time or taking your time or your time's so precious. Why are they asking? Because I'll be on with some people like on a Slack. Like I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to take your time. I'm sorry. I'm like, dude, if you're having issues, reach out, because if we spend like 20 minutes of my time getting you 2 hours ahead, you're not just sitting there banging your head for a few hours. That's totally worth it for everyone. You learn something, we get sped up, you get unblocked. I have some communication with you now, see where you're coming from, how you work, and can maybe help with that later. It's like, again, just open the lines of communication, and from the senior person being asked, make them feel comfortable to ask those questions, because you're just going to make it worse if you make it uncomfortable. Like, well, what's taking you so long, or why is this my problem now? Then all of a sudden they'll just be more hesitant to contact you in the future, thereby maybe increasing the time it takes something to get done. And it just drags everyone's productivity down.
But I do think for junior people need to hear it. They need to come at it with, here's what I've done. This is what I think is the problem. This is what I thought was the problem. Like, come at it with the narrative of a solution. Don't just go, I can't do this. I don't know what this is, because that's happened. That's happened to plan. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, what did you do? Like, I've seen you, Ryan, you help people debug stuff. You're like, tell me what you walk through, what you do. Because if you don't do that, I'm going to have to do all your work, because I'm going to have to do that now. So it's like, just come at it with a solution or with your narrative. And then, related to all that, like you said, it's just being open and transparent. More constantly, being more vigilant about that than you had to back before.
Totally.
Cool. Sweet. That sounds good. I think we're approaching end time. We didn't get to a lot.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I can keep talking if you guys want to. I mean,
okay.
I just said we're approaching the end times. I was like, what that means?
What? Where's that time?
Darker out there.
I know, Obinna, you have a strict 1 hour limit for these, but so.
Yeah, I think for the first time they're seeing our faces, we should keep it to an hour. But I think just
I do want to touch on. Can we do one more? Just one more?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like, because this one I think is a big one. Is like the focus on your health one is the mental, physical, and emotional. Right. That's so important, because I mean, and we kind of touched on some of this throughout the episode, but it's a lot harder to maybe realize when you do need to, like, say, to reach out and talk to somebody, or just get up away from your chair and unplug from work. I know that's helped me a lot, just having at least some semblance of a routine for that. Like I said, maybe try to talk to somebody about something non-work related at the office, or I take a walk every day, just like just after lunch. Like I may, have a quick lunch and then say, all right, I'm just going to go on a 20-minute, 30-minute walk or something, just to unplug, listen to an audiobook, get out of my stinking apartment for a little while, and then come back. I think that's become super important now, because otherwise, if you don't have that way to break things up or try to like focus on that, it just gets miserable. I
feel like, man, we should do this again, or maybe restructure a little bit, because
if you want to put that as like to be continued, then
we should. No, we can still have a conversation, but just saying that there's a lot of tips that we've written in this outline that I think really kind of hone in on the best practices piece, like taking a walk, and especially mental health in this time, I think is critically important. I think it can't be overstated, like taking time to, revitalize and stabilize your own mental health, regardless of where you are, whether you feel like you're mental, I guess, yogi. I think just spending time to still like focus on yourself and take time away from work, whether that's walking or exercising or just talking to a therapist even, is helpful in this remote time, or in this particular time.
Also, making sure, I'll add one real quick. It's also spending time and doing stuff, because everybody is kind of has to be attached to things, even your kids. It's like making sure everybody gets off, like having not. I don't like to say no screen time, because I think watching a movie with like Alex or somebody or your family is like not the same. Screen time is not created equal. If you guys are having fun or playing a game together, that's not screen time. That's together time. But getting away from the things, or getting away from separated, they're talking to friends, they're doing their school, and really making it, because what can happen in these days, they roll into 5 to 6. I'm on a meeting. Alex has got on her thing now. She's talking to her friends because she didn't get to see her friends. So then you feel bad. You're like, well, you can be on there. Then it's like dinner, but it's so late. You run out of time in a day, and you're not actually sitting down and just doing stuff. Like, so making time, like you said, for that, but also for friends and family, all that stuff outside of work is the bigger thing. Because all these things we mentioned for the workplace, you got to do that with your family too. Right. Because you don't. A lot of times you don't see your family, so you got to make regular meetings and Zoom things with your family too. Man, this is a whole other conversation. Yeah. I feel like that needs to happen. Like just even I think we wrote or Ryan wrote down the cohabitating. I think that conversation in and of itself can span, another 30, 45 minute conversation. You can buy our program then. But yeah, I feel like I want to hear more about like how it is living with and working with, your child and kind of working from home and working and schooling from home is another big kind of avenue and thing to talk about. But yeah, I think we should pause it and kind of have this conversation later with some of the other big ticket items because we've missed a lot. But yeah, let's take a quick break and then we'll be back. Cool, and we're back. So yeah, this was our very first video show. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple, et cetera, hop over to our website and check it out on video. Smash that subscribe button. Yeah. Hit the likes, hit your notification bell. Make sure you have all these videos of the Debug Log.
I'm out. I'm done with this. Video is a bad idea.
It's a great idea, right? Cool. Anyway, if you want to continue this joy and this fun, you can always catch us on Facebook or Discord. Just go to our website, thedebuglog.com, and you'll see a link to the Discord. You'll see a link to our Facebook group, which is called the Debug Lounge. So check that out. Andrew, you want to talk about anything else? Anything else?
We have a Patreon. We don't have any rewards. So if you feel like you're a billionaire and you want to give us some money, then do it. Patreon.com/thedebuglog. One day long, we'll have some cool stuff in there. I was going to say the Discord, there's real cool stuff. Even though I don't talk that much, I see everything posted. People started to post cool projects of their own in there. It was really cool. So pretty cool. Check it out.
Yeah, tax season's here. Tax returns are coming. So if you have extra $100, $200,
want to sign it over to
stimulus checks. Come on.
Exactly. Cool. Anyway, you can catch me on Instagram or Twitter at Obinna. That's O with an H, Beans with a Z.
I'm on Twitter at Andrew_Curry. That's CURRIE.
And I'm on Twitter as RE Kilgore. KILLGORE. It's right. Actually, it's right there. It's gonna be on the video stream now. You just make that my Twitter.
Just make it like ad. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. The more you know. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Take it easy.